Can? Can you hear me? Gotcha. Can you hear me fine like this? Okay. We'll go that way. Okay, so how many people are professionals in here? You work, okay, you work in IT.
Okay.
Okay, how many people work in security, IT security? How many people are trying to work in security? So, students? Okay, great, and that gives us an idea.
I like to be interactive sometimes, so this helps us out.
All right, so first thing, if you trust me, if you want the slides, you can get them from there. There's no drive-by downloads or nothing. Preview the URL. It's a Google Drive link.
Trust it. Yeah, trust it.
I'll do it for you if you want, and I'll show you. If that makes you feel better. All right, so she already said who we are. We own a security agency, and we do pen testing. And a lot of times when we're trying to answer questions for people on forums, we get the question, I want to learn how to hack. So I'm assuming everyone here is interested in that. That's why you're here. And I always tell them, I always get questions, what certification should I get? What courses do you recommend, et cetera, et cetera. I always say, build a lab. In my opinion, that's the best way to learn how to do anything. Just get hands-on and just do it. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to set up hybrid hacking lab environments. With the cloud, we use that in our workflow all the time. If I wanted to start cracking some hashes, I'm on a pen test. So I'll spin up a Kali AWS instance. I can cram as much GPU and RAM in there as I want. For $5 an hour, I can crack hashes. So why would you want to set up a hacking lab environment? And of course, number two, if you want to learn penetration testing and hacking. One thing that gets overlooked sometimes for you who work in security, if you are consultants, is if you want to do a quick demo. You're on a sales pitch with a client, spin up a VM, show them a common attack. Most of the time that blows their mind. They're sure, you got the deal. Like they've been talking about, labs are great in corporate structures, corporate environments. If you want to improve your blue team skills and learn how attackers work, if you're, say, a SOC analyst or anything of that nature, setting up a lab and then learning some of the attacks that the red team, as we call them, do, that's a great way to improve your defenses. And finally, setting a lab up at your company is great for practice. We do engagements with clients where we'll set up a lab with the blue team and we'll walk through, like they talked about, purple teaming with some scenarios. But even within your environment, it's a great thing to do, is to set it up and have if you have a red side and a blue side, and have them work against each other, find out the weaknesses of each.
You know, in the old days, you had a lab with switches and routers and things like that, so why not do a hacking lab as well? Same concept.
So what do you need to set up a lab? Probably think you need a whole data center, right? You need tons of servers, you need tons of power. Not necessarily. Nowadays, your laptop can be your lab. Your laptop, your desktop. Servers, you can buy servers pretty cheap off of eBay nowadays. I've got 2 or 3 of them sitting in the closet at my house as my lab there. I've got a couple at work that are my lab. Servers are pretty cheap nowadays. A desktop will work. It really depends on what you have access to, and what you're looking to do. And so when you're setting your lab up, what kind of hardware are we looking for? And of course, your processor has to support virtualization. Again, we're going towards a laptop type scenario. Storage, you're probably going to want 256 gigs because, as you guys know, when you set up your virtual machines, each of those gets a virtual hard drive, right? And that takes up space on your disk. And depending on how extensive your lab is going to get, how much you're trying to learn, that space can quickly add up. So I typically recommend at least 500 gigs. SSDs work better. Of course, they're faster, but they're not a must. And your RAM, you're going to want at least 8 gigs. Windows, if you're on a Windows box, takes what, 2 gigs to run by itself. and then you start allocating RAM out to each of your VMs, and you're going 18, 16, nice. And that's the hardware you need. And that's essentially it. And as you know, pretty much every modern laptop has all of those specs, right? Okay, so once you have your hardware selected, the next thing is you need a host in your host machine set up. You are going to need your virtual machine software. And we have tons of options for this. If you're using Windows, you've got Hyper-V as an option if you're using Windows 10 Pro. We're going to talk about later how you can get that for free. Legally, of course. You've got Hyper-V, there's VirtualBox, we've got VMware, and for Linux we've got Zen. With Hyper-V and VMware, VMware being the paid version, which is only like $90, $120, you get the capability. You guys know what checkpoints are, right? Anyone not know what a checkpoint is? Okay, so a checkpoint is essentially when you build a machine, you can checkpoint it and create an instance. At that moment, it copies how that machine is set up, and then later you want to revert back to it. Your lab gets taken over with malware, you're trying something, you mess something up, you just revert back to that checkpoint, which is a nice capability. But with VMware, it comes with the paid version. Hyper-V has it by default. So before you start something new in your lab, before you branch out, run a checkpoint, and you have something to go back to. And we'll get there. So now that you have your VM set up, you're going to have to pick a distro, right? An operating system for your hacking. Kali Linux. Anyone here not heard of Kali? Okay, I thought so. That's the hacking operating system, right? Then we've got Parrot. Parrot is essentially, I've been playing around with that one a lot lately. In my opinion, it's Kali with a little bit more focus on cryptography. It's got some cryptographic tools on it. There's Pin2, of course. Backbox. If you're looking to get into web, we have the Samurai web testing framework. If you're looking to learn more about forensics, we have Deft. Anybody here heard of Commando VM? You played around with it? Yeah. I didn't know that. Commando VM, great tool. It was released earlier this year, February, March time-ish, around the time of, what's the conference out in California? It's by Mandiant and FireEye, and it is a Windows-based hacking OS. It essentially, you download it, the stager, I guess I'll call it, for lack of better terms, and it downloads everything else and installs it. And you can run pretty much anything you can run on Kali, you can run it on a Windows box. I used that recently on a pen test. The scenario was a rogue vendor, so I got a laptop like a vendor would get with non-admin credentials, and I had to see how far I could get in the network. I tried everything I could to elevate my access on that. This was a bank, so it was super locked down. I mean, I was sticking the laptop in the freezer trying to do memory dumps and cold boots and everything. I couldn't elevate access, but what I could do when we did finally find a way around that, so the scenario was, I'm a vendor, I can't bring my own laptop on the network, right? I have to use what I have, so I downloaded Commando VM, put it on the box, kept out a couple tools that would have set off flags on the antivirus, and I was good to go. So yeah, Commando VM is something I would recommend looking into. Stop me if you have anything. Okay, so once you have your lab set up and you have the operating system of choice or operating systems, the next thing you're going to want to do is find something to hack, right? You've got to do this legally. What are we going to hack? The nice thing is there's tons of vulnerable systems that you can download to practice on, and you can download these at any skill level, and as you build, you can get harder ones. So of course there's Metasploitable. By Metasploit, you guys, anyone not heard of Metasploit? Good. Okay, there's Morning Catch. Anyone here heard of Morning Catch? All right, so Morning Catch is a virtual machine you can download, and it's sort of automated, and it's for learning social engineering and phishing attacks. When you get on a pen test, if that's where you're looking to go, and you're working on social engineering, the last thing you want to do is make a dumb mistake in your spoofed email that sets it off and everybody sees it, right? so you can get a VM like Morning Catch and you can practice that. So you have your skills honed by the time you get to the job. The OWASP, broken web applications. Anyone here familiar with OWASP? Anyone not familiar with OWASP? You never heard of OWASP? Okay. So the OWASP, I can't remember what it stands for, but every year they do research based on the top web vulnerabilities, and they release the top 10, the OWASP top 10 we call it, most common vulnerabilities in coding of websites. And so they release that study every year. They're pretty much always the same, cross-site scripting, variations of that, etc. And they have vulnerable web apps on their site that you can download. They have a web app testing framework that's really nice that'll walk you through how to test for a bunch of these different things. WebGoat has vulnerable web apps, and then VulnHub. You guys heard of VulnHub? They've got tons and tons of vulnerable instances that you can download for practicing. Sometimes this is overlooked. You guys heard of ExploitDB? You work with exploit development using exploits in your attacks. Anyone not heard of ExploitDB? Okay, so if you're on a test in, I'm looking at SLMail for an example. That's a pretty old, something I was playing around with recently. You can go there and you can download shell codes, etc., that you can put into Metasploit or just run as an executable and elevate privileges, get root, get access, etc. Sometimes people don't realize for some of those exploits, you can actually download the version of the software that it runs on. Not all of them, but sometimes they have that, and you can get vulnerable software that way also. And of course, outdated operating systems. Windows XP. I see that in so many environments. XP, Windows 7 is going end of life. I see old versions of Server. The last guy was talking about Server 2000. I see that all the time in environments. Microsoft has some of those available for you. You can go download from TechNet in different places and have a way at them. Exchange, same way.
A lot of times you find these in the environments that you're going into are critical systems that they can't do without because it runs this application that they can't update for something else. So there you go. You have an open door. I'm like, keep them all kind of just
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead too far. Okay, so you've got the machines, and now you need the tools, right? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hacking tools. And so we can't go through them all. I'm just going to go through some of the basics. There's Nmap. I'm sure everybody here's heard of Nmap, right? Network mapping. Nessus is a vulnerability scanner. That's a paid tool, but they recently released a free version. Previously, it was a home version. And you can scan up to 16 or 24 machines, which is plenty for a lab. Responder. You guys know about Responder? Okay, so Responder, essentially, it does an ARP spoof, and it spoofs. You can get NTLM hashes, you can get SMB authentication, you can do DNS spoofing with it. If I'm on a pen test and they're in a Windows environment, a lot of times I'll run Responder to try to, in the authentication, of course, NTLM v2 is the most up-to-date version, but a lot of times you can force it to downgrade to an NTLM, and you can grab those hashes of their credentials when they log in. So I like to run that on a pen test. If I'm on site, I'll start in the morning when everybody's getting there for 10 to 15 minutes at the most, because it can get pretty messy. ARP spoofing causes a lot of problems. Yeah, or I'll do it at lunchtime. I'll come back when everybody's come back from lunch. I'll run Responder. I can usually pull 5, 6 hashes there, and then I'll send them up to start getting cracked. John the Ripper for password cracking. It's a pretty old one. Everybody knows about it. There's others. Hashcat. There's quite a few password cracking. Anybody here heard of PRET? Printer Exploitation Toolkit. It's a really, really nice tool. As you know, what's typically the two weakest points of a network? Printers and VoIP. Yeah. Printers and VoIP. You can pretty much always get in printers and VoIP. They're never set up right. They're using old technology. They're easy way in. So for printers, a gentleman, I believe he's from Sweden, Jens Muller, he developed the Printer Exploitation Toolkit. And essentially what it allows you to do is it uses the printer PCJ and PCL commands, and you can connect to a printer and copy off print jobs coming to the printer all day. No need to dumpster dive anymore, right? You just go to the printer and see what they print. It's a really nice tool. Metasploit, everybody's heard of Metasploit. Again, these are just basic tools. There's tons and tons more. Social Engineers Toolkit. You guys heard of that? Anyone not heard of it? Okay, so Dave Kennedy, who was here earlier, that is a tool developed by them, and essentially it allows you to create payloaded documents. You can spoof emails with it. It's a social engineering toolkit. It's nice. GoFish is another one I use. I've got a couple VMs up in the cloud that I run that off of. And what's nice about GoFish is you have an email you want to copy. Of course, you're going to spoof it. So I can copy the HTML code out of a Gmail email, for example. I can put it into here and send that. I can also, if I want to mimic a landing page, I just put in the URL, and it will copy the code and make a landing page for me that looks just like it. So I want to send them to Facebook to log in, put in the Facebook URL, login URL, and it copies it. You got to work with it. Yeah. I've had various success rates. Tweaking things, you can get it to work. It depends on what email client they're using. If they're using an Exchange on-prem. PowerShell Empire. So these three are post-exploitation. Metasploit can be post-exploitation too. Probably Pret also, you're going to have to be on the network. PowerShell Empire is a offensive PowerShell toolkit. Tons and tons of nice tools in there, nice commands you can run. What you have to watch out for with that is, as these things become more common, they get picked up by the antivirus companies or the endpoint protection, and a lot of times they are caught like Mimikatz. Pretty much everyone catches Mimikatz nowadays. The Kerberos toolkit is a nice toolkit if you're working on Active Directory environments. Everyone heard of a Kerberos attack, where you essentially, the short of it is, everyone knows how Kerberos works, right? With ticket granting servers, and you get a ticket, and you use your ticket to authenticate throughout the network. Well, there's golden tickets, which give you elevated access. The Kerberos attack is you find a service account. I mean, there's multiple ways to do it. Typically, what works for us is we find a service account. You pull down the Kerberos, you request a Kerberos ticket for that service account. Anyone can do it. Windows, unless they have their security really ramped up, anyone can pull down the Kerberos ticket, and it goes to RAM. Then you use Mimikatz or another tool, dump it out of RAM, and crack it. And then you have the credentials for a service account. And then you can use that to elevate and get a golden ticket. And then if you're at that point, you're doing pretty well. And then Crack Map Exec is another PowerShell toolkit that's nice to use post-exploitation. And again, these are just a few out of hundreds and hundreds of tools. And what I would say when you're using these tools is understand what they're doing and how they work. Nobody wants to be called a script kiddie, for one. But for two, when you get into an environment, your environment changed. So like that pen test I talked about I was on, I had a Windows box, low-level access. I could not run PowerShell. I couldn't download or install any tools. I couldn't do memory dumps because of my access. So I could run command prompt. So essentially what I did is first thing I did is I wrote nmap in a Windows command prompt and created my own tool. I know how it works. And I ran it as a batch file. I could do that. So learn how the tools work, and then you can retrofit it to your environment, what you're up against. Then I would say in your lab, learn Active Directory. What is it? 80-something% of organizations, 85, something like that use Windows as their systems. So you're going to come up against Active Directory. You're going to deal with Active Directory. So build a domain. Anyone here not dealt with Active Directory, not set up a domain? Okay. But you understand how domains work, right? Gotcha. So essentially you have your domain controller, and then you have different levels of access. You have groups, right, and that regulates everything.
Yeah. Controls and main things all over permissions and everything. Active Directory in an organization is very powerful software, but at the same time, if you can get in there and implement Active Directory, it's very powerful
Yeah, because most of the time it's not set up securely. So it's pretty easy to get. It can be a great benefit for attackers. So build out a domain. And we're going to show you how you can get that for free to do that, because Windows Server is very expensive. Set up various users, set up access levels, set up groups. And then, so you're getting a couple benefits from this. For one, you're understanding more deeply how Windows works. For two, as you set this up, you can see what common people are doing. And you can see the mistakes that they're most likely making and how you can take advantage of that. The guy before showed the event views. That's a great example. Once you see how the admins work, how they look at that, then you start getting an idea of how you can undermine it. Practice with GPOs, group policy objects, seeing how you can attack those, get around them. The Hacker Playbook is a book, but on their website they have a great tutorial how to set up a Windows domain. And then there's another great tutorial that walks you through the entire process of the basics of setting up domains. If you trusted me and got the link, those are in there. So if you want to set up Active Directory domains, how can you get it? Server is very expensive, right? Has anyone here heard of the Windows Evaluation Center? Has anyone not heard of it? Okay. So Windows Evaluation Center, basically every operating system they make, you can get it free for 180 days. Server, Windows, Windows Enterprise, all of them, you can get them free for 180 days. And what Microsoft tells you, when you download it and install it, set up a checkpoint at the beginning. When the 180 days runs up, revert back to your checkpoint, and you're good for another 180 days. Totally legal, and it's a great way to learn. So, of course, what we've talked about is we can build all of this on our own hardware. But where it gets very interesting and fun is when you start using the cloud. With cloud computing nowadays, it's super, super cheap. Amazon AWS instances, Azure. Anybody here heard of Vultr? Vultr hosting? I like them. One of the reasons I like them so much, for one, they're cheap, and you can upload your own ISO. So if you have your own operating system that you've customized and built, say you've got Ubuntu with your own tools you like, build an ISO of it, and then you can put it up there in the cloud also. One Host Cloud, they're another good one because they allow pretty much any type of pen testing you want to do on your own environment, so long as you're not DDoSing or DOSing. And we're going to look at those in a little bit more in a second, but then capture the flags. You guys are all aware of capture the flags, right? There's online ones you can use to learn. Hack the Box. Everybody's heard of Hack the Box, played with them, got in. Of course, there's a little challenge to get in, but there's tutorials to help you. Hack the World, Over the Wire. You guys heard of Over the Wire? So if you're wanting to learn Linux, I tell everybody, go check out Over the Wire. Essentially, you SSH onto it, and then you have to find tokens hidden on the computer. And each token is your SSH key for the next level. And you learn all kinds of Linux. It's a great tool. And then you keep progressing up the ranks. All right, so as you can see, you are allowed to pen test your environments on AWS. As long as you are not doing DDoS, and if you are using any of those types of instances, you are allowed to pen test your own environment. You can't do DNS zone walking, DOSing, port flooding, protocol flooding, or request flooding, but other than that, you can do what you want on your own instance. And they're pretty cheap. They even have a Kali ISO that AWS gives you that you can install on your instance if you want. This is Vultr I was talking about. I've got a couple C2 servers sitting up on Vultr that I use. That's the $10 a month. There's another one that's $5 a month. It's pretty cheap. And it's the $5 a month, I think it's a gig of RAM, 25 gigs of storage. That's great for a lab. So if you don't have access to hardware, which we pretty much all do, but that is another option. And as you start doing more pen testing, like I said, we've got a couple C2 servers sitting up on Vultr. And that's about as much as I'll say about that. And then some books that are great for learning. Georgia Weidman, she wrote the book Penetration Testing, a Hands-On Introduction to Hacking. That is a great book. It's a little old, but if you learn the principles, they still apply, of course. The Hacker Playbook by Peter Kim, that is at version 3 now. That's another great resource. Black Hat Python. One thing I like about that book is they teach you, like I talked about, learning how your tools work. One of the exercises in that book is building your own nmap out of Python. They teach a lot of nice things in there. Hacking, the Art of Exploitation, all of them. Those are great books. You guys heard of Kevin Mitnick? His book is great for social engineering. It can broaden your understanding to some unorthodox methods you can take. I'd say the same thing for the Social Engineers Playbook by Jeremiah Telemantes. You guys heard of him? Red Team Secure up out of Minnesota. They do a lot of physical pen testing and a lot of social engineering. That's a great book. He just released another one on physical pen testing. That's good. And then, of course, this is only the beginning. You've got your lab, and you're working on it. Security is a constant, lifelong learning, right? I guess how I got onto the train was back in high school. A friend of mine got hacked. I said, wow, that was neat. I want to do that. And I've been learning ever since. That's how I got started. Cybrary. You guys heard of Cybrary, right? Cybrary is a wonderful resource. I mean, there's tons and tons. I've only picked out a few. HackerOne. Are you guys familiar with bug hunting? HackerOne. Anyone not heard of HackerOne? Okay, so they'll pay you, of course, for bugs. Have you guys seen their HackerOne University? The intro to web hacking? Yeah, I think it's on the, once you log in, if you set up an account, it's on the right, I believe. Look at that, the HackerOne University. BugCrowd. You guys heard of BugCrowd? Same thing as HackerOne. They have a university, it's called a university. They have tons and tons of videos that teach you web exploitation. YouTube, there's tons and tons of great channels on YouTube. I'd say check out all the DerbyCon videos from the previous DerbyCon conferences. As many BSides events, as you can see, there's great talks at those. All the DEF CON are great. And then a couple of the recent ones I've been looking at some. Cyber Mentor, Heath Adams from here in Charlotte, he spoke earlier. His channel's great. You guys heard of Sequire? They are a Polish cybersecurity company. They do a lot of talks. They develop their own tools. They're a great company, and they have a lot of nice tutorials, memory dumps, developing shellcode, etc. Then blogs. A lot of blogs have a lot of really great tutorials, as you guys probably know. You guys heard of Hackers Arise? He has tons and tons of hands-on tutorials, walks you through. He's got a whole series on Wi-Fi hacking. He'll walk you through a WPA hack, WPS hacking, WPA2. He's got tons and tons of great tutorials. He also teaches courses. I've never taken any. That's up to you to figure out. TrustedSec has great tutorials. Dave was here. You guys heard of Black Hills InfoSec? They have a lot of great tutorials too. And they got a lot of good information on Kerberos. They have a lot of good blue team tutorials too. How to set up honey service accounts so that should someone try to do a Kerberos attack, you can set up service accounts that automatically alert someone's using this because only an attacker would. And then Metasploit Unleashed is a course on the Metasploit website. That's a great place for learning. And I'm sure you guys have other places, but that's just a few I picked. So that's what I have to say.
Questions, comments?
Sure. I do have most of this information on a blog on my website, if you're interested. Yes? Yeah. 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 I got quite a few back at Christmas. I think it was like 40 books for $20. It was really nice.
That's a good point. Did everybody hear that? At Humble Bundle? That's a very good point.
Really? Those are great to keep an eye on.
Resources out there.